Okay.
All right, quick reminder. Do we have to show the slide for this meeting as well? Or is that only in public meetings?
Your attendance and participation in this private meeting for Sandbox reviews warrants your compliance with Linux Foundation's antitrust policy.
It's all meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I'm just going to record that and play that every time.
All right. Real quick before we kick off, I want to make a note real quick. The OpenTofu project was removed from the CNCF TOC's Sandbox application review for this meeting due to a licensing conflict with the charter. We have reached out to the project and reached out to CNCF Legal on next steps. After discussion with CNCF staff, regarding our processes around this, because this is a unique situation. It is requested that the TOC provide the legal committee with a soft statement around whether or not we feel the project would be complementary to the ecosystem so that they know to engage in the either a charter change or a license exception kind of conversation. So this is not a TOC decision. It is more of, do we think the project would complement? If so, that allows the legal committee to take next steps. So when the time comes, we can appropriately review the project. So I'm asking TOC members on the call today, do you think the project would complement our ecosystem? If I can get a verbal yes or no, that would be fabulous. Not everybody all at once.
Sorry,
Alternatively, plus ones in chat.
Yeah, you can also post it in chat if we think the project is complementary to our ecosystem. +1 from Ricardo, +1 from me.
I think it's a pragmatic reality. Lots of people have Terraform. They're open to it.
Seeing some others come into chat. Karina, Nikita, Dave, Lynn, Kevin, Katie. Cool. All right. Dims, excellent. Legal committee, you have our statement that we believe OpenTofu would complement the CNCF ecosystem. Sweet. We can now move forward with the Sandbox review.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, so first Sandbox project up for review is Tratteria. I hope I am saying that correctly. So let's see, Kathy and Nikita, you're the ones that were from the TOC looking at this project. Did you have an opportunity to do that? Would you like to weigh in at this time?
Yeah, I did take a look at it. It's unclear to, so like first thing that stood out to me that was a big one was that the project seems very early stage and it is mainly a single contributor project, with one contributor having around 90 commits and just another one 4 commits. It also looks like there hasn't been much activity from August of this last year. And I was also not sure about this, but I would personally like to understand more from Hack Security's feedback on the presentation, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So that's kind of my initial take on this.
So it sounds like this would be a good candidate to go back and look at community building. I know we've recommended, oh, sorry, Emily, go ahead. Your hand is up.
So I looked at this project, not with my tag security member hat on, but just as a security professional. The neat thing about this is it extends the interoperability of SPIFFE beyond just what its current capabilities are to include transaction tokens, this is kind of in the emerging technology space from a security perspective. It's extending a lot of the cryptographic roots of trust into transaction-based security, which is kind of cool. It is very early, so there's been a lot of discussion around this topic. This is the first project I've seen that actually touches on this, that has some potential. But that's kind of all I know about it. I do have a lot of individuals that are interested in learning more about it, though.
Emily, oh, sorry.
Carter, I believe you're next.
Is that me now?
Yes,
Sorry.
Ricardo.
Sorry. So I have the same feedback on being too early, but I do have some additional things that in the issue, it is mentioned that the project was presented to tax security, but I could not find recording notes or anything about the feedback from that presentation.
That's good to note. I was just going to ask Emily, when you were looking at it, does this look like a good candidate if it is very few maintainers? It said 3. Could they, and they build on SPIFFE, is this a good candidate to go back to SPIFFE and work in that space, or should it be standalone?
I think it needs to be standalone. It doesn't make sense to have them underneath of the SPIFFE project or the Spire project. They should be an independent project. We do have a precedent with other projects that implement the SPIFFE specification that are very similar in standalone. As far as kind of where it sits on the fence between, it's very early, but it is kind of cool. It can go either way. I think having more focused feedback from tax security would be beneficial. But it sounds like from everything I read about the project that they're engaged within the SPIFFE community and ecosystem.
Thank you. Dems, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, did they talk to the OpenSSF folks too? Since there is like a IETF draft and whatnot, so maybe there is some. So just a question, if anybody saw anything about like them engaging somewhere else other than us. Yeah, thank you.
From the comments here, and since we have another 19 projects to go, it sounds like this would be a good candidate if we move to acceptance with caveats to have the follow-on written documentation from tax security. Is that a blocker or not? Can we move forward with asking for more information going through the acceptance process? I see Ricardo nodding. Emily. Move to a vote or moves to need info is what Emily is asking.
I think a vote.
Okay. I say move to a vote as well. Ricardo, I believe yours is move to a vote. And Emily too. Does anybody think it should not move to a vote? Okay. So Bob, this one moves to a vote and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, spin. This one means we have spin and SpinKube that we're going to discuss at the same time. There's been a lot of back and forth on this, and Ricardo and Katie, you're the ones that are listed on these projects. Would you like to?
I can start. I had a look, Katie, just compliment if I missed something. But there was a lot of discussion. I think the first thing is to acknowledge the engagement from people in tech runtime, but also in the project on the discussion. I think it was really useful in the last couple of weeks. There is an existing WASM working group assessment that has had 2 versions, but we should focus on the last one, I guess, with some recommendations and things that should be changed in the project. Basically, renaming the namespace to remove affiliation with one company, and double check the validity of the name SpinKube. This can be sorted if the other recommendation is taken, which is to merge SpinKube with Spin. There's no argument against it from the project, from the most recent discussions. So I think the recommendation from Tag Runtime is to go ahead and include it in Sandbox. But I guess if there anyone from Tag Runtime that can add something as well.
Bob
Yeah,
had his
well-
hand up first.
Yep. One quick clarification on regarding changing the names and things like that. Usually they don't have to do that to get into Sandbox. It's just when they're accepted. There's several things outlined in the doc that like generally would be changed once they're accepted. There's no point in them changing their like some of the references to companies and things like that if it isn't actually accepted yet.
Exactly. So these
yeah.
are not stoppers. These are recommendations of things to be done after Sandbox.
Yes.
But in any case, for the naming, if we get both projects merged into Spin, then this is a non-issue anyway.
Yeah, they were comfortable with merging the two projects under one.
Katie?
I think I'd just like to echo Ricardo's comments as well. The project does fit the cloud native ecosystem and kind of the definition and the space that we have. There has been a lot of discussion. There has been a lot of assessment. I think maybe a bit too much assessment for a Sandbox project as well, but I definitely want to commend all of the effort because if you look for some of these assessments and docs, they go pages and pages. So definitely good to read. Some of these post kind of Sandbox recommendations, they're definitely commendable as well. And I would definitely recommend the project to look at them too. So a lot of good effort there. I think the community did express their concern about these projects being separate. Seems like SpinKube seems to be an operator that uses Spin, which is one of the core libraries. And I think one of the concerns there was that there might be a situation when they might change the license where the core components, which is Spin, is not going to be available anymore. So this kind of merger is going to be a very good, I would say, action item, which will take into account the community feedback as well, and it would put kind of that mind at ease for all of these adopters as well. So I would like to reinforce the merging of these two projects into one and going for Sandbox.
Thank you, Katie. Bob confirmed that they did confirm in the doc, and I know, Emily, you mentioned the that you recommended getting confirmation first from the maintainers. Are you satisfied with the confirmation in the document? Or
Yep.
okay, that's good. And Stephen, go ahead.
Yep. Thanks, Steve Rust from Tag Runtime. Just wanted to reiterate that Runtime agrees with the working group WASM assessment. That I think that document really summarizes things really well as kind of a bipartisan recommendation between all the active parties in the WASM community. So they had certain pre-Sandbox, like merging the two projects agreed to, and then some post-Sandbox items identified there. All of that sounds great to move forward.
Great, thank you, Stephen. And all right, Bob. Everybody, this looks like it's probably good to move to a vote. Or does anybody feel like it needs more info? Okay.
I think we should specifically say, yeah, cover both Spin and close the other one. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you all. With 17 more to go, next up is Substation. Molly and Duffy.
Yep. So Duffy sends his regards. He's unable to join today due to a meeting conflict. I'm going to read through his assessment real quick. That was posted in our Slack. Substation has a bunch of reviews in the comments. Super helpful. Looks specific to AWS, but does intend to branch out into other architectures. He is supportive of the project. My assessment of the project is it's focused largely on serverless data pipelines for AWS Lambda, largely because of the donating organization that's their current cloud service provider. They don't support others. They do want to add GCP and Azure, but they do not have a roadmap for this. The kind of intent that I got reviewing just the project independently is that they're waiting on acceptance to CNCF to be able to start pursuing those other integrations. Now, in the past, we have gone back to projects that are applying and asked them to get that support in before they join CNCF so that they are actually providing that multi-cloud kind of functionality and capability. but overall, they don't have any plans at this point in time. The other item that I wanted to mention is it doesn't look like they have a ton of integration with other cloud native projects, although there are plenty of opportunities to do so. And Tag Observability provided a sandbox review of Substation as well. And I'd like to get Matt's kind of quick synopsis on that. But Bob, your hand is up first.
I was actually just going to say, pretty much what Chris said. We have accepted other projects that have been single cloud into Sandbox with like essentially incubating. The request is by incubating to either support more cloud providers or to, at least enable like a plugin or extension mechanism where someone else could PR that in relatively easily with support.
Yep.
Okay, Matt, please.
Hi. I wanted to, before I responded to the comment, I wanted to provide a brief outline and get some brief guidance on messaging. So I have 5 things that I think I would like to see that would make it, I think, a viable candidate. And briefly, they are the patterns and practices. These different patterns that they've got in their architecture. That's one of the key values of the project, right? So that's clear. If that were brought to the forefront and codified in an abstraction layer, that's the second thing. He did say that there is a place where you could wire in a completely side, parallel implementation, but you're just starting from scratch at that point. So if these patterns were modeled in an extensible plugin way, or using, classes or whatever, that would simplify the addition of support. One way that could be done was with a cross-plane integration. That's the third thing. That might be a fast and easy way where they could provide, a reference implementation that they already have via Terraform on AWS, but it would be easy to test and quite doable by Brex. Right, they could do a cross-plane implementation and have apples to compare, and then you've actually got a viable project that is multi-cloud, including notably, there's no way to run it locally. So even to try it out, you need it to run it on AWS. The fourth thing is the governance, meeting structure, community health. Right now, I provided a brief overview, but it is what it is. But I don't see a roadmap or a path to a community that grows. So, some sort of statement. And that gets to the fifth point. There is no roadmap or resourcing that is believable without some kind of, I don't know the specifics, but I don't see it in the project today, resourcing or a roadmap. But I do think Brex could do this, and I think it could be quite a cool project. Lastly, on JSONet briefly, there is a rich niche tradition in the observability space for JSONet. If anyone tried to run Grafana to monitor Kubernetes, like the mix-ins and the libraries that you use to generate dashboards, for example, were done in JSONet. There is also the KSONet project, which I wish kind of existed, but it is admittedly a steeper learning curve, but it might be a nice thing to have JSONet at still alive in cloud native, other than in the shadows and used by a few very productive people. So that's that. Yeah. Oh, lastly, I wasn't sure how much of this to put into like the issue, like how much do we coach these projects, or is that formally done part of their acceptance into Sandbox? And as was previously stated, we've had similar projects like this and similar asks that as projects move through the incubation process and the tags, we provide that feedback and help them do that. So I didn't want to speak out of turn, in other words, so could use guidance there.
Thank you, Matt. We'll follow up on guidance. Your review was very thorough and incredibly appreciated. Josh, I know your hand is up next.
No, I took it down. I was going to point out the lack of a roadmap, but he already did that.
Okay, thank you. Dims?
One main concern I have is like a random person, like GSOC or somebody coming in from the code won't be able to do anything in the project right now if they don't have an AWS account, right? So that is a major blocker to let people even trying to do something to help the project. So I think that is going to be like a big obstacle for anything to happen in this project. That's my biggest fear, is like we'll get this in. If we get this in, then we'll be in the same spot a few months from now or a few years from now. So yeah.
Thank you, Dems. I know Emily put into the comments that the recommendation is to ask the project to engage with tag observability and address some of the items highlighted before moving to a vote. I'm in agreement as well, but Ricardo, I want to hear what you
I had the hand raised before just to say what it is.
Okay. So it sounds like move to needs more info with those clarifications.
But I will also say, Karina, that they can only come back to us when they are able to like get somebody able to do something in the project without needing an AWS account.
The onboarding. So
yeah,
that's a good question about the cloud providers.
If it's helpful, I could draft up something succinct that I talked to and put it to the channel or wherever it should go as part of that messaging. I have strong reservations about even something entering the sandbox that people can't just generally try in a free way, in an open way. So, and also Terraform can be a bit of a rat's nest and a constant maintenance issue. Right, to be honest. So I would really like to see a reference implementation that aligns more with the landscape.
Thank you, Matt. Can you draft and send an email to the private TOC? That might be the easiest.
Yeah, I'm not sure actually sure if I have that super secret address, but yeah, if somebody could message me on Slack, that's great.
We'll do that. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move that one to postpone. Bob, you have the information that Emily put into the chat, and then we'll move to the next project. Next project is SlimFaas. Kevin and Len, if either of you.
I can go first. So yeah, I did look at the SlimFaas project. It's a very interesting project. Propose a simple and lightweight to do functional as a service. The instruction looks straightforward. You could potentially get started with a Kubernetes distro, so it doesn't tie to a particular cloud, which is great. My concern with the project, though, is it seems a very small project and it only have 3 maintainers. And I also attached screenshots to the issue about the contributor activity. They only have like 6 contributors. And if you look, it's mainly like one person doing all the work. Even though they have 3 maintainers, but the other maintainers, like the second largest contributor, only have 5 commits. And his most recent commits is like July or somewhere between maybe September last year. So I would say the other contributors are not really very active at all. So it's pretty much like a single maintainer project. And it's all from a single vendor, which I believe they are an end user. Actually, look up this company who is sponsored the project. I think they are an insurance company in France, if I understood correctly. So it doesn't look like they are, selling a solution based on the project, which could explain why there's only one person primarily working on the project. So Kevin, I'm going to pass the mic to you and see if you have any insights you want to add.
Yeah, I also took a look. I think it's an end user, right? And also, yeah, I see in the chat window, and it's confirmed that it's a French insurance company. Yeah, and I would say the project is kind of in the early stage for building the community. Yeah, that's my input.
So I guess I raised my own hand. Oh, somebody else has their hand raised. Was that first? So what I was going to say is that this project, Ricardo, do you think they would be a good candidate for the end user community through the tab and to find out more of their motivation for submitting the project to the CNCF?
I think one thing that came from the discussion is that the person submitting it, Guillaume, he's not completely aware of how the CNCF TOC is structured, because he was asking about what is tag runtime. So what I would ask is that he at least presents the project to tag runtime. He might be able to get some coaching there and some clarifications of the things we just discussed, and maybe come back to us. Aside from the other comments that are already in the chat, like the MIT license and the single contributor.
Emily, it looks like your hand was up.
So I think for me, my recommendation is probably to move the project to a vote. I would expect and anticipate the project engages with runtime to kind of meet and get expectations for being a CNCF project, making sure that the project is familiar with who tech runtime is, and knows kind of like the path for participation within that technical advisory group. But I don't foresee recommendations or changes based off of a presentation to runtime actually impacting the TOC's decision to either include or not move to a vote on this project.
Sounds good. Thank you, Emily. All right, so moving to a vote or moving to more info? Emily is recommending moving to a vote. Does anybody disagree?
Just one more data point. Most of the code is in C#, so that is going to be like another barrier for the contributions here. So just something to keep in mind.
Thank you for that call out, Thames. That's a good data point. Okay. With no objections, it looks like we'll move to a vote. Bob? Okay, so the next project up for review is Alustan. Dems or Katie, would one of you like to speak to that?
Katie, do you want to go first?
I am finding my notes now.
Okay. Yeah, then I can go. So this is again a single person project. It is really early stages. They're talking about using Argo CD in many different ways, but the code is not there. They don't have sufficient releases under the belt. There's not been much engagement in terms of issues and pull requests. So I think they need to build a little bit more before they come back to us. Definitely talking to tag app delivery will be useful for them. I don't think they've done that yet. It's too early, basically. Katie?
Yep, I do agree. So in my notes, I did put that there hasn't been a lot of work on the project in the last 5 months as well, which indicates again that they actually need to grow in terms of community support and adoption. I think the idea is good as well, but it does require a bit more work. One-man projects are very tricky to Sandbox because they just I know that they hope for that increased awareness and increased knowledge of the project and hopefully getting those contributions as well. But I think there's a bit more work that the maintainers will actually have to do and be a bit more proactive. So definitely would recommend a chat with Contrib Strategy as well, in addition to app delivery too. So perhaps if we have the reapply in 6 months option, I would definitely recommend that.
Thank you, Katie. Bob?
Yeah, this is the person's first project. It's their first open source project and kind of like first, I think, like real coding project looking at their previous issue. So while some coaching from some of the tags, might be helpful, I like in general, I think it'll have to be pretty like light or just very, very, very generic.
Thank you. I agree with Emily's assessment, reapplication contingent on contributor strategy engagement and app delivery. We did not talk about it at the beginning of the meeting, but are all TOC members okay with, if you've reviewed the project, that you're doing the follow-up comments that Bob has not put in for vote, but to continue and close it out?
Maybe leave a note for us, please. So Alustan, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. Moving on to the next project, container to WASM. Since Duffy is not here, I'm going to see if he also mentioned container to WASM in the. Okay.
He did.
He says it looks like a container to WASM looks like a good contribution. There's only one maintainer, but that hasn't blocked us. When I was looking at it, I was concerned with that it is a one maintainer project, and that the WASM community we've already talked about Spin and SpinKube. It might be good to have him engage in the WASM working group to identify more people who might be able to contribute. And this is a good candidate for coming back in 6 months after engaging with the WASM community and getting more contributions. It's Ricardo. Do you want to speak to that? The maintainer is
I
K-Top.
can. Yeah, so I wanted to highlight this because I understand, but like both Kohei and Akihiro have a pretty good history of launching these kind of small projects that grow into very large communities. We've seen this with things like Lima and others. So they understand very well the ecosystem, how to build a community and get these things pushed forward. So in this case, I would take this into account.
Very good feedback. Matt?
I just wanted to briefly say that one of the more interesting use cases for this project is to run LLMs in a browser with local resources via web GPU. That's kind of popped up in the AI community in recent weeks for a month. I'm sure it's been done by others, but I just caught wind of it a few weeks ago, right? So strategically, I think this is to the previous point, a potentially small project that could blow up to be quite widespread in its adoption.
Yeah, I agree, Emily. Recommend move to a vote. Does anybody disagree? Okay, move into a vote. Thank you. Next project is Kubeinvaders. Ricardo or Emily?
Ricardo, I'll let you go first.
You can go, Emily. It's fine. I've spoken a lot.
Okay, so I took a look at this project. It's a gamified chaos engineering toolkit for Kubernetes. It's largely designed as a teaching tool to understand the resilience of clusters. However, in looking through the project, I struggled to understand how this can move forward towards graduation. I think there is a business value perception of the project being gamified chaos engineering tool versus actual value add for SREs, because it does seem to be largely focused around educational content. Not to discount that, I think that is important, but whether or not it warrants inclusion into Sandbox on a path towards graduation is kind of like, I'm unsure of. So that was my evaluation of it. Ricardo?
I second that. I don't have anything to add. I think the discussions we had about having a different path for this type of projects probably makes sense here, but to be seen later.
I just add a comment in the chat. So since the DIMS is working very hard to make sure we have a proper naming guideline for Kubernetes, should we ask the project to consider renaming?
If accepted, right? So
yeah, if accepted, for sure.
When you put it to a vote, and then at that time we'll have to put the caveat in.
I agree. And then the toolbox, if we had it, this might be a good comeback in 6 months, and we might have had the discussions around toolbox. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but if it's using like Litmus or something else, like it might be a fun little thing for them to, integrate in there. So like it could be a pet project under one of the other chaos tools.
Right.
Okay, perfect. And Emily, I agree. Reapply in 6 months, name change if accepted. And I don't think we should mention toolbox yet in the comments. That might be a can of worms, but looking at Litmus or other chaos engineering tools.
Who should I tag to respond?
I got it.
Perfect. Thank you, Emily. All right. Next project is K0S, Dems, and Kevin. I know you both have been looking at this. Would one of you like to begin?
Kevin, would you like to go first?
Yeah, actually, my biggest question is about that. It's distribution, and the good point is I don't see kind of fork of upstream Kubernetes, and also they claimed that they don't change the Kubernetes code. So I think that's a good point. The second thing we need to take care is about the dependency part. They clarified that they are kind of all the code we distribute are the Apache 2, and the other part with GPL they are only using the binary. So maybe this one we need to double check. Yeah, that's all from my point. Yeah.
Yeah, just to summarize a few things that we talked about on the issue. We were talking about like, is there any good back and forth happening with the Kubernetes upstream? Then we were talking about how they are doing telemetry. Those were some other things that, other than what Kevin was talking about. Yeah, I did verify that they are not making any changes to upstream code, no patches, so which is a good thing. It does feel like most of their the folks are like users of K0S, and like I'm hoping to see some more data on like them getting to convert that to actual contributors, but that's not a barrier for here for Sandbox. So +1 from me, and I would support this application.
Matt?
I would love to welcome the project to present to tag observability around how they're considering telemetry. To Dims's point, I think that's really critical. I love the project as it is. I'm not really, I haven't played with it or assessed it, but I'd love to see that if they were open to it.
I'm sure they would be. Not a blocker, but we'll recommend that. And Stephen, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to mention that they were able to present last December, which I linked to. We also talked about the DTR, GTR questions, and they filled out those also in addition to presentations. So that's from an earlier comment there in the issue, that they updated all the GTR questions there. And then that includes, they did a self-assessment for security assessment as well, included in that repo.
Wonderful.
So yeah, all positive interaction. Two companies maintainers currently. It's I believe 7 maintainers potentially. So yeah, we'd recommend moving forward.
Thank you. Okay, agreed. Emily posted in the chat, move to a vote. Okay, and Lynn as well. We will move that to a vote. Thanks, Bob. And who would like to be tagged, Dems or Kevin? Kevin, would you like to take this one for any follow-up comments, like recommending the talk to tag observability?
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Did you have anything, Dems?
No, I had already talked to them about like following the LF guidelines for gathering, the data that they were presenting there, in terms of like how many unique clusters are there and stuff like that.
Oh, perfect. I'll let you and Kevin work out who's going to.
Yeah, Kevin knows, so yeah, happy for Kevin to handle this.
Thank you. Okay. Next. Sorry, we're pushing through. It's a lot of projects. So if it's feeling rushed, just stop, raise your hand, etc. Okay, awesome. Okay, next project is Kardinal.
Yeah, this is a great speed, by the way. This project should be easy because it appears to be archived already. So I don't think they have any intention to take it through Sandbox process. But let's wait for confirmation from this guy who opened the issue.
Yeah, it's archived. The Playground project that it links to right below there under additional repos has been archived for months now. And I think there's been no contributions to either one since something like October. So I think we can pretty quickly move on.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so due to archive, okay, Emily, I was going to suggest move to a vote, but yes. Bob, you got that? Okay. Perfect. Next project is Runme notebooks for DevOps. Kathy or Dave? Dave, I know you're here. Would you like
my
to?
notes were in a different order, so I'm just jumping over to Runme. I think if I remember correctly, in general, it looked pretty good, but I'm trying to find what useful things I said aside from it looked pretty good. But I seem to remember it having a decent amount of contributions, a decent amount of activity lately, like looking like a perfectly good Sandbox project and like things that they wrote. So yeah, I mean, I would, now that I don't find what I wrote, I mean, I think it's good to move to a vote, but that's not the most useful thing I can say right now. But project-wise, contribution-wise, it all looked like very reasonable. I think it had a decent roadmap, like a bunch of issues that would seem to be moving. So I had no real concerns with it.
Thanks, Dave. And it looks like Ed, also his from contributor strategy, also looks like there's no blockers. Looks like move to a vote. Ricardo, go ahead.
I do have a question. I think this project is very cool, but I don't completely see why this would fit the CNCF straightforward. Like we have maybe projects that are similar, but I was thinking, because this basically is translating Markdown notebooks into deployable instances, but it wasn't clear from the information that this is such a clear fit for the CNCF. I don't know what others think.
Yeah, I think I was probably too distracted by it being cool to immediately answer that. But I also looked at it as, I think most places I've worked at some point have tried to do something like this for markdown run books, like operations and on-call things. And they've written their run books, they've eventually moved them to markdown, and they've eventually said like, oh, a bunch of these are either automatable or should be much more similar to a Jupyter notebook than just an alt-text markdown file to make middle of the night on-call responsing as kind of brainless as possible. So it felt to me from that point of view like a thing that a lot of end users would be interested in having. And thus, like I said, that it seems like a good sandboxy, like, let's see how this goes. But I'm more than happy to hear from other people here that that is not a thing that makes sense.
Thanks, Dave. We'll see what Emily has to say.
So +1 to everything that Dave said, but I want to kind of expand on it a little bit more. Some of the feedback that we've gotten around cloud native projects thus far is some of the difficulty in either getting up to speed or integration from an operations perspective, making sure that we have seamless management practices associated with infrastructure and tooling and things of that nature. I see this project as having the opportunity to kind of fill that gap. It has the potential to act on a lot of the principles that we set forth in cloud native projects, but isn't technically embodying the various aspects of cloud native. So this is kind of on the fringes, and I think inclusion in Sandbox would allow us to test the viability of it and the interest by end users and other organizations. I too was distracted by, this is kind of cool, and not thinking about the cloud native aspects of it. So given kind of we're all on the fence about this, I would recommend moving this project to a vote, and then probably ensuring that they have a close engagement with the correct tag to ensure that they're meeting expectations for CNCF projects and have a path towards graduation in the future.
I was going to echo a lot of what you were saying, Emily. I also wanted to add that a lot of, with AI, a lot of people are looking to move to Markdown to help consume and standardize. I wonder if moving to a vote, if this one goes to Sandbox and is tested out, and if we end up having the toolbox that we've been talking about, that eventually, instead of going straight to toolbox, it would have two paths and could potentially move into a toolbox type scenario, or if it gains traction, move into incubation. But overall, move to a vote. Anybody in disagreement? Okay, move to a vote. Thanks, Bob. And on this one, Dave, would you like to take any follow-up comments on the Sandbox issue itself? If you feel you need to put any.
Sure, yeah, I can put something there.
Probably the follow-up tag also. Okay. Okay. Next project is CloudNativePG.
I think I was also on that. I don't know who I was with. Okay, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, I don't have any concerns. It's majorly an operator. It seems like a pretty mature project, good contributor and end user base. One thing I was just wondering is, like, should they even consider applying for incubation over Sandbox? But Alex, you also have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say they've been working with the tag for quite a while now, both in terms of sort of working with the community and with the project.
Go ahead.
Sorry, and the project has they did apply for Sandbox previously, so this is their second time round. Since their first application, they've added tons of functionality, and in terms of operators, it's now become a tool to also set up replication and multi-availability zone across clusters, and it's very sophisticated and very mature. 68 million downloads. So no issue kind of recommending this, and it is at a maturity level where it probably would be fast-tracked to incubation. I think the team wanted to go for Sandbox first, given the first time they were sort of postponed, I guess. So
Thank you, Alex. What did we tell them in the previous Sandbox application? Do you remember, Alex, for DIMS?
I do not remember.
Do you mind pulling that up while we go to the other comments really fast? Bob, I think your hand was raised next.
Yep, I was just gonna say, like, as far as an operator goes, like, I would consider these a pretty solid standard. They add a significant amount of functionality on top of Postgres itself. It's not just like spinning, just spinning up and letting it sort of do its own thing. It does add a good amount.
Awesome, thank you, Bob. Josh?
Yeah, since I couldn't attend the tag storage meeting, just to give you an idea of the sort of ecosystem here is, the Postgres project is supported mainly by services companies, and each service company has their own Postgres Kubernetes operator. The other ones have not been interested in joining the CNCF, but this one, which was created by Enterprise DB, is interested. We might see some interest from some of the others if Enterprise DB is successful in the CNCF. I have a feeling that they need to spend some time in Sandbox probably to get some adopters who are not also Enterprise DB customers. Because of that sort of services company ecosystem, it's likely that most or all of their current adopters are also customers.
They have adopters across sort of major cloud providers, IBM, Azure, etc. Plus Upbound are now maintainers as well. So they are kind of growing in that respect.
Ricardo?
I just wanted to add the project, every time it's presented, you can see a lot of end users are adopting it. We use it internally as well at CERNs, and there's quite large deployments outside of Enterprise DB. I did talk to Gabriele at KSD Denmark, and they're okay with going through Sandbox first to clean up any kind of issue on onboarding, and then apply for incubation.
Okay. Thank you. All right, it looks like it's time to move this one to a vote. And Alex, we can follow up on any other recommendations on the issue. And the next one is Drasi, Kevin or Katie. Katie, we haven't heard from you in a minute. Would you like to start on this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So Drasi is a data processing platform. It has a lot of overlap. Well, actually provides similar functionalities to Argo events, but different, of course. It comes from Microsoft. One of the observations that I had, it actually presented tag app delivery and tag runtime. However, I didn't see any recommendations out there, so I presume if anyone from tag runtime or app delivery would like to say anything about the project, that would be cool. Another observation I had about the project, it's very early stages. I think it was created in September last year, so it's only 3 to 4 months old. So it's pretty new. It has most of the contributions coming from Microsoft. It has some kind of stars and some kind of engagement, but it's still early stages, I would say. So considering the timeline of creation, I might recommend for them to perhaps wait a bit to see a bit more community engagement, unless maybe Kevin has other recommendations or observations.
Yeah, I took a look at the contributor basically maintainer activity. So mainly 2 maintainers are relatively active than the others, but actually I think it's the first week they are active, the follow-up weeks not that active. So that's my little bit concern. And it's true that it's a very young project. Yeah.
So this one looks like, thank you, Kevin. Also, all right, we have 2 hands raised and then we'll move it forward. Stephen?
Yes, so Drasi did present to runtime. They seem well organized, certainly from the Microsoft perspective. There seems to be a primary engineer, and they had some program managers as well, kind of coordinating things. So internally, at least, it seems well organized. It is about 6 months of public development, so I agree with the fairly early commentary, as well as likely just from one company. So yes, it did seem early as well.
Thank you, Stephen. Dems?
Yeah, I think the stuff we talked about comes back here, which is it Azure specific? Can somebody work on this project without having an Azure account? That would be something that would stop us from picking it up immediately.
Bob?
It's not very clear from the description.
So just one comment on early and things like that. We have accepted very early projects before. Like I think it was Kairos, the Microsoft like AI toolkit that they had announced at a previous KubeCon keynote, and then I think it went into the next Sandbox review. So like I wouldn't necessarily consider it being, publicly young as a blocker.
Looks like Chris confirms that it can work on K3s and kind as well. So okay. I'll take that back.
Thank you, Chris. That's a really good call out. This one, it almost sounds like it's on the cusp of moving to a vote or asked to come back in 6 months. Do TOC members feel strongly? Emily, you did mention, and I agreed at that time until I heard follow-on comments, the recommendation to reapply in 6 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Vote. Yes, +1.
Okay, sounds good, Emily. Okay, recommend move to a vote. If it doesn't pass, reapply in 6 months.
Anyone going to follow up on this one?
Katie or?
I'm happy to.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, moving on. The next 4 were going to be considered together. Emily and I need to recuse. I will say that the development teams all wanted to have them as separate projects and not considered as a single application. The TOC members that are on the first one, Podman Container Tools, that's Kevin and Dems. Would one of you like to begin?
Kevin, do you want to go first?
Actually, I don't have much opinion on this project. From functionality perspective, actually, the Podman container tools to provide very fruitful functionality. And actually, my question is about how do we consider, because there are multiple relevant projects applying, so we see that as individual projects or as a group. That's my only question. Yeah.
Okay. So overall, technically, no questions about all these projects. Builda, Scopio, I use it all the time. Bootsy and ComposeFS, I haven't used it as much, but other than that, Podman always comes into question when we talking about kind, and they show up everywhere where we have Docker, and they say and they come and say, how can you add Podman too? So from that point of view, the team members from Red Hat are very engaged in the overall community, and they help out everywhere. Whether it is Containerd or Cryo and other projects, they are always there and trying to make sure that everything works and stuff like that. Specifically coming back to Podman, there is a problem here in the sense that they don't have a good sub-project model, so to say, right? Like everybody works on all the projects, and like there isn't any like governance body kind of thing where there is no evaluation on like why are we starting this new repository, what is the rationale for it, and who's going to work on it, and people tend to get added as maintainers as they join Red Hat, and when they leave Red Hat, they tend to get. So there isn't that governance model that is set up yet for this, and most of these tools are under the containers GitHub org. So I have a feeling that we need one GitHub org where these projects are going to live, and that in this case would be the Podman one, and the Podman desktop and Skopeo and Builda can live there, but I want us to be able to say that they have good governance before they bring in the rest of the tools, right? So I want Podman to get in first, and Podman goes with Podman desktop. Let them set down the rules for like how are they going to govern themselves, how are they going to like bring in new sub projects under them, how are they going to add maintainers and delete maintainers, and like what is their set up their contribution ladder. Once they set up all the infrastructure stuff for like governing themselves, then they should also have a process of like, okay, do we need to bring in one of the other repositories, which may not work standalone, right? Like Bootsy, for example, right? Like I have a tough time trying to figure out like how can it go from Sandbox to incubation to graduation if it's not part of something bigger like a Podman GitHub org. They can pick another name too. Instead of Podman, they can pick up another GitHub org, but have Podman in there and Podman desktop in there. But my request is to have one project picked up, including Podman and Podman desktop, and then set up the blueprint, and then start picking up the rest of the things that they would like to get into CNCF. That's my take on this whole thing.
Thank you, Dems. George, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I just happen to be digging into these repos a lot lately. I'm very biased because I'm consuming these a lot. However, I think I've come to an understanding on how these fit here in the CNCF. So usually when I talk to people, Podman, Builda, and Skopeo, those are almost always together, right? And as we were going through the process, people were like, oh no, there's all these container tools. So Jiffy and I were thinking for Podman, Builda, and Skopeo, it kind of becomes like a generic container runtime toolkit. And as those mature, we perhaps look at consolidating some things like Cryo underneath there that kind of shows that kind of Podman ecosystem. I actually think that Bootsy and Podman desktop should be separate. Bootsy is kind of at the operating system level, and it kind of moves. It's not really depending on Podman. It's like different life cycles as far as stuff. And I think once Colin gets in the Debian and Arch builds that he's working, that will bring the kind of, there's going to be interest for people to use Bootsy that aren't necessarily interested in the Podman stuff, other than that being in their payload. And then ComposeFS, I think, is critically important to be separate because it is providing Verity at the file system level down, and that's going to be consumed by a lot of folks that are doing the image-based work over at Microsoft with LenArt and all that stuff. And ComposeFS is kind of a bridge between cloud native and those kind of low-level folks. And then that will also be
moving at a different cadence, I think, because that will be consumed by a bunch of tools that have nothing to do with Podman. It's just like this
Yeah,
little
we never indicate that they should all follow the same rhythm, right?
Okay.
So they can all have independent this thing as long as they are they live within the same same umbrella, so to say, right? Similar to Kubernetes, right? Like we have Kind, we have Kube, you have so many other tools in Kubernetes which have independent, KubeBuilder, for example, right? So that's what we're talking about here. So yes, Bootsy, ComposeFS can have their own life cycles, like no questions there.
Emily, your hand's up next.
Yeah, I had a clarification question around like moving forward with these four projects. Is the recommendation that the TOC make a decision on the Podman Containers Tools application and then hold off on decision making for the remaining three until governance can be set up for Podman Container Tools if it's accepted? Or is the recommendation that all four move to a vote and then there is a focus that all four of the projects need to have a realistic conversation with contributor strategy on what is the appropriate governance and project and sub-project structure for each of those, whether or not one stays independent, like Bootsy becomes its own project, or ComposeFS, such as we've discussed here. So I'm trying to understand, like, what is our recommendation on how the TOC is going to move forward here for all four of these?
So there are four under consideration. So we move them in together, except that what we are saying is that it should be under one GitHub org, and they should figure out a governance before they do anything more, right? Anything else, because there are other projects that they're listing as under consideration, other repositories that they are considering under, as under consideration, right?
So the as we've already seen several coming in from Microsoft, these are each different projects coming out of different teams to give you more background. And so it's coming from the same company, and they all have different areas in the cloud native ecosystem that they would like to go integrate with and focus on. So it would be a struggle right now, putting them all under the same umbrella in order.
Yeah, they have to talk to each other. That's basically what I'm forcing, Karina. They have to,
Is that a blocker for Sandbox? Because I guess I'm struggling with why that's a blocker for entering Sandbox from all the other discussions that we've had today.
So it's similar to like Spin and SpinKube, the Podman container tools and Podman desktop, right? So it's like one is using the other one, so to say, right? So I would like them to be under the same thing, and the others are like, even if they are not too far away from the main one. If they want Bootsy and ComposeFS as totally separate one, we can vote on it, but like, honestly, I'm struggling to see how it can get into graduation.
It looks like Bob is first and then George.
Yeah, just my general thought, like as far as the like technologies and things themselves, I think it's solid to move them to a vote and sort of figure out how the structure should be, later. It's something that they absolutely would need to solve by incubation, but I wouldn't necessarily consider it a blocker for them to apply to Sandbox, and definitely having this be sorted out, ideally early on, or like right after, acceptance, if they're accepted.
Bob, what I'm saying is like we should accept them, but with a caveat that they should be under a structure. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Sorry, I thought.
Yeah, I'm not saying like don't accept them. I'm like accept them, but tell them that they're going to live under GitHub org, and they need to figure out how each team needs to talk to each other and figure it out, right? Only if they are able to like talk to each other within Red Hat will they be able to like get external contributions, right? Like, so first is to set the stage within the company, and then for the teams to figure out a common governance, and then they'll be able to like extend that to people outside, right?
Thank you. George?
Yeah, I'll be quick. Tim's the reason I was kind of coaching them towards having separate repos. That containers repo is older than the CNCF, and there's a lot of stuff in there that we're like, you know what? We should just greenfield a few of these. That's
They
why we
should
ended up
have
this way.
separate repos just under the same GitHub org, and they should have the same governance.
And Katie, you have a good comment. I wanted to know if you wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, so it's pretty much building up on Dimsy's comment. I think the message here should be very clear from us, because if we accept them individually for individual votes to Sandbox, that might reinforce the idea that they can move individually to incubation as well. So I don't think this should be something of like, oh, at some point when they apply to incubation, we will kind of reinforce that message. I think it should happen at this stage with a very strong recommendation. If it passes vote, then these are the action items, very clear. And I think we should be, strong about this as well, putting boundaries.
Thank you, Katie. Stephen?
I just wanted to mention that Bootsy and ComposeFS are scheduled to present to runtime this Thursday, and the container tools in early February, just as another data point for the discussion, and happy to pass along any TOC recommendations at that point as well.
Thanks, Stephen. George?
Sorry, that was an accident.
All right, so this looks like it's moved to a vote with strong recommendations if they are accepted. But I want to make sure I'm clarifying, because we've talked a lot about it. Move each to a vote individually. Dems, is that what you're...
No, if we do that, then we'll be in the same boat as before, right? We might end up rejecting one of them.
Yeah.
But I would,
I think it might be good for us to recommend which one you recommend them to consolidation. To Katie and Dim's point, it would be odd for us to say, hey, we ask you guys to look at consolidation, but not providing a recommendation. And this is not to say they have to follow a recommendation, but it's good to provide some type of guidance so they know what we're expecting out of the moving to the next phase, which is incubation.
Chris, it's too late. By then, like all the separate teams in Red Hat are working by themselves, and they don't want to mess with each other, right? So
I'm an optimist that like part of Sandbox is them figuring this stuff out over the long term. So that's kind of my viewpoint here. But I do feel like the biggest levers you have are on project acceptance and on project moving level. So you just kind of have to decide when you want to use those levers. So, and I think there's no question that these tools are not like widely adopted, right? Like these are used all over the place. It's just a matter of how maybe the TOC wants to see them collaborate, structure, governance, and so on in a way that's beneficial for the end user ecosystem. But I think that's going to take some time, in my opinion.
If the governance for the containers GitHub org was already, really gelled, then we would have gone straight to. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
Totally. Yeah.
That is why I'm trying to force that to go into Sandbox, because technical aspects are already sorted out.
I think it's like vote, but with caveats of like, here's what the TOC really wants to see these projects, do as they're accepted, right? And maybe make the comment that the TOC will not consider incubation until these things are fully resolved, but with the preference of like trying to resolve these things sooner than later, right? And they could work with tag runtime to do that and contributor strategy. That's how I look at it.
So just for the sake of time and everything, just voting on this one, and who wants to follow up?
I had the strongest voice, so I don't have a choice. But I'm hoping that you all agree. Otherwise, there's no point in me trying to do that.
Yeah. I think I agree as long as it's a strong kind of recommendation, because I think they're going to have to sort stuff out, on their own. You can't really force, things on them, but you can make strong recommendations.
Yeah.
Why are we voting on one? Like there are still
Should be
50
separate.
submissions, so I
Yeah,
understood that
yeah,
we
it should
vote
be separate.
separately and we
Okay.
recommend that
Yeah.
they review themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we could hold separate meetings with them, or you know, it could be contributor strategy or runtime where you know these things are kind of.
I'm going to copy this to them
Yeah.
just for we
Okay.
can sake of time.
And Josh, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear on what the recommendation is in terms of consolidation, because we have some TOC members in the Slack comments saying that they're recommending just consolidating Podman, Container Tools, and Desktop, and that Bootsy, ComposeFS should still be separate. So I just wanted to get an idea of what's being recommended in terms of which projects to consolidate.
So I think there's enough consensus in the chat. Both C is by itself. I think a lot of TOC members agree with that. As far as the three other tools, I don't think I have the brain power to sort out right now if all three should be combined together. I do feel Podman Container Tool and Desktop should be combined. I don't have the brain power to think about if the other one, ComposeF, should also be combined. Maybe Dims and Katie and somebody else have strong opinion on that.
So at this point, I guess we should just say we are voting in. We would like you to join under one banner. We leave it up to you to figure it out. Which ones are fit well with each other, and to minimize the footprint and maximize the chances of them getting to incubation.
Awesome.
That's basically what we can say at this point. Then.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you, Dims. Okay, Josh, is your hand up again, or was it from before? Okay, moving
Sorry,
on. Okay, thanks, Josh. Okay, we have less than 10 minutes left. Next is CBE Fleet. Emily and myself. Emily, do you want to start on this one?
I'll let you start because I've talked a lot.
Sounds good. All right, this is another one coming from Microsoft. It's a multi-cluster solution. They haven't done any community building. They've indicated that they will when they move into Sandbox. They are obviously in the ecosystem. We know that's not a code dump. And the question is that do they run on other cloud providers? Because to Dim's points earlier, we want to make sure people can use projects. So the response is that it's not a prerequisite. Microsoft Azure is not a prerequisite. It can be installed. At the time when I was looking at the project, it wasn't obvious how you could. So I would recommend that moving into Sandbox, they document how you can use it on other cloud providers so that people can test the project. So essentially improve onboarding. Recommend move to a vote with those caveats.
Karina basically said everything I was going to say. Definitely agree with moving to a vote with the expectation that if the vote passes, the project improves the documentation to demonstrate support for multiple cloud providers.
Okay, and thank you, Emily and Bob, if you want to go ahead and assign that one to me. Thank you. All right, we have one more to go. Oh my goodness. We've gone through a lot. Okay, so Hyperlight. All right, this is also coming from Microsoft. So we've had 3 Microsoft projects. Hyperlight is as a Rust library, and Emily and Nikita. Nikita, we haven't heard much from you. Would you like to start on this one?
Sure. So Hyperlight is basically something that's looking at a new approach towards hypervisor-based isolation, and it helps mitigate risks associated with Sandbox escapes. So it looks good to me, but I also wanted to hear more from Tag Runtime because it looks like they've presented And Stephen, it looks like you had been coordinating with them around the presentation.
They actually have not presented yet. They're scheduled for early February. So we tried to engage earlier, and they were kind of on hold right after KubeCon. They you might have seen they like did the pull request on stage potentially to do this application. But definitely looking forward to engaging them. Just haven't done that yet.
All right, Emily, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so from what I could tell is it's a Rust library that allows for the creation of micro VMs, which is kind of cool, but then I get hung up on it's a Rust library. I know Bob is saying it's more than a library, but I think given that we don't have enough information in front of us to really fully understand the project, I would like to have the project present to Tag Runtime and have Runtime give us a recommendation based off of that presentation so the TOC can make a vote. I'm not comfortable enough with the information that I have at my fingertips to be able to say one way or another. So I would recommend we move this to needs more information so the issue would remain open. And then once Tag Runtime comments with their recommendation and analysis, then we can make a decision to move to a vote at that time.
Had another network hiccup. It looks like this is a move to needs more information. Okay, and then we'll see after they discuss with Tag Runtime. And it looks like the WASM working group, because they do talk about WASM within the application itself. Okay, and
Okay, so who should I tag to follow up?
I can take it.
Perfect. Okay, Stephen?
Just as a clarification, they are presenting to the general runtime meeting. Do you recommend that they also interact with the WASM working group? We could forward them there if that makes sense.
And recommend that you invite the WASM working group into the Tag Runtime meeting so that there's more interaction.
Yep, that's an excellent idea.
Perfect. Okay, it looks like Katie, you had a really quick comment. Few of the Microsoft projects have prior development before public engagement.
Yeah, but yeah, pretty much same the projects we reviewed earlier. Seems like the projects were developed internally and they perhaps are used internally as well, and then they've been open sourced, but we don't have that prior kind of historical data points of how it was developed and used. So that's I think a bit of confusion. The projects do seems to be stable and mature. They tend to pick up in that community engagement, but it's very early stages. 2 months is not enough for us sometimes to make a decision of like, yeah, it's a great project. So just want to note that out. It's it's on a verge here.
Yeah, I think for some color there, I think it's used pretty heavily internally, and then when they make the decision to be a community thing, they just see CNCF as a good place to do that. So that's why there's this kind of things come out of nowhere, but it is something they've been working on quite a bit.
Exactly, but I think it's important for us to note this as well, because some projects may look and be like, oh, it's been only for 2 months. Like I can open source my project as well, or I can donate it to CNCF.
Yeah,
I think that's
totally.
Some of these nuances. Perhaps I did call it out in my previous comment when I followed up. So perhaps we need to capture this as well.
Totally.
Good. Thank you. And with 2 minutes, it looks like, unless there are any closing comments, we are good to go. And we finished the Sandbox review.
I do have some comments. First off, TOC members, congratulations. This is the most amount of engagement we've had on a Sandbox application review, and pretty much all the time I've been on the TOC. So y'all should be feeling the love. I know it was a lot of work, but definitely appreciate it. And I'm sure the projects do as well. And I also want to extend a special thank you to all of our TAG and TAG working group members who have spent time evaluating these projects, particularly deep diving on several of them that seemed to be a little confusing. We really appreciate your time. It's helped us make more informed decisions for potential inclusion into CNCF. So thank you all. This is a great start to the year. Our next Sandbox meeting will be in approximately 2 months. We currently have 9 projects in the backlog. Let's hope it doesn't grow to another 20 before then, because this meeting, this length of time is unusual, and I would not want to keep up that cadence. So thank you all very much, and a great way to start 2025.
Bob?
Also, please, if you're a TSO member, vote on the Code of Conduct Committee elections. We're close. We only need a couple more, and then the voting will be complete.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye all.